Yeah, I do just want to thank everybody, and I just want to let everybody know just how important the document this is for the school district. Because oftentimes, whether it's disciplinary or just everyday conduct, this is our standard frame of reference. And we all go to this in terms of what is an appropriate code of conduct or behavior for everybody and anybody who works in the school district. So it does take a lot of time and a lot of consideration, and over the years, it's taken lots of revisions. So I thank everybody who's been involved, the superintendent, and I also want to shout out to the district clerk, who oftentimes has to collate and do a lot of the difficult tasks in terms of getting everybody to meet and recording the minutes. So I'm grateful for this, and I look forward to the meeting in July when we talk about it again and hopefully pass it. Okay, any other discussion? Any discussion from the public? Code of conduct? No? Okay, then may I?
Dr. Ryan, I would like to confirm that the code of conduct has been sent out to our school community, to parents and to staff for their input. I know that was an issue for us the last time we went around and did that we didn't get a lot of feedback, but I think we need to give people the opportunity to do that.
Yes.
Has that been done?
Yes, Mrs. Rona, we asked both the middle school and high school principals to send it home to families. Typically, we get more feedback from that level than from elementary. And they were to bring to us any comments or questions that we did get.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll take the motion to close the meeting.
Motion. Second.
And the discussion? Okay, Ms. Pace? Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
Ms. Brona? Ms. Conway?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, I sort of feel like I'm the Three Stooges of the left this over here. May I have a motion to open the meeting again? May I have a second?
Yes.
Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Pace? Ms. Pinto?
Yes.
Ms. Brona? Conway?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay.
I'd like to invite Mr. Veto forward once again to give us our final presentation on our budget before it's put forward to the board for adoption.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. The title of tonight's presentation is Budget Adoption 2022-23, because tonight is the evening when the board gets to adopt the budget. What does that mean? The board's adopted budget. That means that for the past few months that we've been doing budget presentations, talking about different areas of the budget. We've broken it out by function areas, topically. That now's the opportunity to actually adopt the budget, say now this is the board's budget. Before tonight, they were just administrative suggestions about what should be in the budget. And so this is the opportunity now to put forward a budget for now the community to vote on at the May election and budget vote. Right, and I have a slide at the end of this presentation that goes over some other important dates. So this is the time where we reach a final number of what the actual total budget is going to be. And revenue projections. So we'll talk about how we're going to pay for this budget of 2022-23, which is the next school year's budget. So the second draft, the first draft of the budget we presented in the last board meeting. So we came forward with a number, but the number that we're going to present this evening is actually a lower number. And I'm going to talk about why that's lower, but it is the full budget from function A 1010, which has to do with the Board of Education, to function A 9901, which has to do with transfers to other funds. So that's the complete total budget. The line by line is on the website. And I would just like to let anybody know, if anybody's viewing this presentation from home, you can click on a link to see this budget presentation. If you're having any trouble at all seeing the presentation on the screen, you can click on the link by going to the website, either under the ticker tape that talks about the board meeting, or if you scroll down a little bit, it talks about tonight's board meeting, and you'll see a link to the presentation. So the second draft of our total proposed budget is, you see here, a little bit lower than what we presented last time. Now we're at a 4.93% variance, a little over $7 million. And similar to what I said at our last meeting, that number, that 4.93 that used to be a little bit over 5% when we presented the first draft budget, is a little bit misleading because it includes a large amount that we're transferring to the capital fund for capital expenses for next year. We did a lot of different presentations and conversations about the capital projects that we want to move forward with. And a portion of that, about $4 million of our capital project for next year, is included in our budget in the transfer to capital line. And so that's why when you take that amount away, which I think is for about $4.3 million, you're left with really about a 2% increase in our operating budget. So that's why it's important to know the difference between those two different percentages. So how about, let's talk about the difference between the first draft budget and the second draft budget, which is what we're presenting tonight and what we're asking the board to adopt. So it's $124,598 lower than the first draft budget, and it's based on a few different increases and decreases that I'm going to go through each of them right now. So the first is the elimination of the earlier proposed additional 0.6 FTE special education teacher at Veto Elementary. We talked about that we need more elementary teachers when we talked about the new elementary schedule. I know Dr. Manelli is going to just refresh everybody's recollection about what that schedule is going to look like. He's going to do a slide a little bit later on, but we did spend some time talking about the changes to the elementary program that were actually giving students an additional 40 minutes of instruction. We're lengthening the day by 15 minutes and combining a professional period with the lengthening of the day, and we're actually gaining 40 minutes of additional instruction for next year. And we need to cover that with different teachers. So as we did some further reflection and, between first draft and second draft, we look over our function areas and we see what we can do to fine tune, and we review different areas where we want to spend a little bit more time, also taking some input from the Board of Education, and we realized that we can eliminate what we had earlier proposed of a 0.6 FTE of special education at Veto to cover that day, because we can move a teacher that was doing something different and a different assignment and put that teacher over it to cover that 0.6 of Veto. So we don't need to ask for an additional. We still need the coverage of Veto, but we don't need to ask for an additional 0.6. We're going to just shift some teacher assignments around to cover that. We're eliminating 0.3 FTE of world language overages, and this is really a function of taking a look at the fact that we do have some declining enrollment throughout the district, especially at the elementary level, and that we can shift some portions of teacher programs around and do a savings of about 0.3 of an FTE. So we had some world language overages, and what an overage is when a particular teacher works more than a 1.0. So they may work a 1.1 or a 1.0, which is a little more than their typical full-time program. So we're able to shift some programs around and actually save 0.3 FTE in world languages. So that was then reduced from the first draft budget. Took that out. The elimination of funding for creativity camp is in that function 8060. Since we are doing some different after-school enrichment programs, and people have been enjoying them so much, and we are going to move that forward with that again next year. The funding for those after-school enrichment programs are coming out of the ARP grant, that we can eliminate the creativity camp because it becomes a little bit redundant. So we can have some savings there, but not a lot of money there. I think it's about $10,000, but it is something that we could eliminate and not have that redundancy. Again, some other features of where this $124,598 of savings comes from: elimination of a 0.2 FTE of an art teacher from Veto Elementary. When we talked about, again, consolidation of specials based on the fact of some declining enrollment, consolidation of different, making things more efficient, we are shifting that 0.2 from Veto to the high school. So we did talk about increasing the program at the high school when we talked about the secondary program, that we wanted to increase art because so many more students are asking for art courses, and we wanted to accommodate the student requests. So we're able to take the 0.2 from some savings and efficiencies at the elementary level and shift that over to the high school. And when we did the first draft budget, we didn't realize that we had put it in both places. So we actually took it out of Veto. It was a correction that we made in the second draft. We spent some more time over the past couple of weeks taking a look at summer school, and since we started in the past few years, it's really fluctuated a lot. Last year we included elementary, There's been some changes over the past couple of years, and then we realized that the number that we had for the summer school budget was really higher than we need for this summer, and it starts right in July. So we took a closer look at those projections, at the cost figures, took a look at the different conditions over the past few years, and realized that really the model that we're going for this summer is really lower than what we had originally thought in the first draft budget. And that amounted to about $50,000 in savings, so we were able to reduce the budget by $50,000. We needed to adjust a few staff salaries upwards. So again, as we go through the budget, we take a look at every staff member, every salary and everything, then we realized that there were a few staff member salaries that weren't the right amount, that sometimes it rolls over from the system, sometimes a glitch in the system when it rolls over from one module to another, then we needed to make a few adjustments in staff salaries, and that ate into some of these savings. Again, when I talk about these different elements, it was an elimination, a decrease, and here we actually needed to increase a few of those line items. The next one is an interesting situation because every year we have a line item for pre-K teacher salaries. And typically we have our 12 sections of pre-K at the salary rate that we have, and we put it in the budget because we never know if that UPK grant is going to come forward. And we know, and I've been saying this for years, is that that's an area where it becomes a placeholder, and we know that we should at least end the year with the amount of money that we have in that code, because if the grant comes through, those pre-K teacher salaries will be charged to the grant. So it's a safety net for us, just in case that UPK grant doesn't come through or there's some sort of a change, that we know that we can run the program. But what's happened over the past couple of years is that we've reduced the sections of pre-K based on a declining enrollment. So I needed to adjust that pre-K line item to coincide with reduction into 10 sections. But we actually, I had one other just in case, just have to be conservative. So we have it for 11 sections, but at the new salary schedule. But it yields a net reduction of $22,000. So we changed that number. And then the last item is an allocation that we needed to increase for graduation and moving up ceremonies. When we did our outdoor ceremonies last year because of COVID, and we had the elementary moving up ceremonies at the administrative tent, outside of the administrative building, we didn't know whether we were going to do it again this year. So we did not have it in the budget because we weren't sure. And now that we received such positive feedback on those outdoor ceremonies, we also had a couple of other ceremonies there from the high school. We decided to put that now in the budget as a baseline funding. So we needed to increase that by about $40,000. So that's really the highlights of what we've done over the past couple of weeks, from first draft to second draft. There may be 1 or 2 or 3 other items of a small nature that we did in terms of a correction, but these are really the highlights. Now I'd like to just ask Dr. Romanelli if you would just review for all of us, again, the concept behind what's called the discovery period, what it's going to look like, because I know that when we talked about that originally when we did the elementary program, there were some questions that we got from parents, and we want to make sure that everybody's clear about what that looks like. So I'm going to ask Dr. Romanelli if you would take us through.
Thanks so much, Mr. DeVito. Welcome everyone this evening. We have 4 wonderful elementary schools in our district, and we already have a very equitable program across the 4 buildings. The elementary structure for the 2022-23 school year will be actually one that is the same for all 4 buildings. So we have a completely equitable program across our buildings. You'll see that just based on this slide, each student going through the elementary schools in our district will have a literacy block, a math block, science and social studies on an alternating basis, a special lunch, PE, and recess, and time for play breaks in the morning and afternoon throughout the course of their day. We're also able to incorporate a discovery period with the expansion of the elementary day. This discovery period is where that additional staffing will come in from our budget and from our grant funding as well. And this period is one that we're really excited about. It's really going to be a differentiated approach to instruction based on what our students need. That could be choice enrichment opportunities for students. It could be intervention in reading and math. It could be manipulatives to focus on key and really strengthen key mathematics concepts at a specific grade level. And the discovery period will come at different times throughout the school day based on the grade level. For instance, in K and 1, we may not need both periods of math in order to deliver the core instruction in the earlier grades. So we'll use one of those periods as a discovery period. And later on, as our students progress through their elementary years, we can use one of the later grade levels literacy blocks as our discovery period to focus on some differentiated instruction there. Again, some other ideas that could take place during that time: book club time, genius hour. The teacher can facilitate some independent learning opportunities so students can explore their own learning and really focus on that different inquiry approach that we're trying to establish at the elementary school as well. So thank you, Mr. DeVito.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about updated revenue projection. So I think it was perhaps on Friday, we got some updated information regarding state aid. So I'd like to start there. You see here we have a dollar variance of about $329,000, a 1.3% increase. That is the difference between the revenue projection for the current year. And I know if you look at Newsday, if you look at some other publications, you'll see a few different percentages that's quoted. I'd like to just explain that so we're all clear. First is, and we are very grateful to all of our state representatives for moving forward with what's called some changes in the foundation formula that has allowed us in Long Beach to have a 3% increase in foundation aid. And that's real money, that's new money, that's 3% more than we're expecting to receive in the current year. And that's based on just some increases that they've pushed through in terms of updating the formula, in terms of what's the allotment. Now, the formula itself, what goes into what's the foundation formula, is made up of a lot of factors. I think it's about 20 different elements in terms of deciding what a particular school district is going to receive. A main factor is the wealth ratio. Another main factor is the percentage of students eligible for free and reduced lunch. So for us, we are getting 3% more money than in the current year. Now, I know if you take a look at other districts, you take a look at, if you span all the districts in Nassau County, for example, you take a look at some of what some would consider a wealthier district, right? And you see, well, why are they getting more? Why are they getting a higher percentage? Why are they getting more foundation aid, much more than we are getting? And the answer to that is that for some districts, they're still playing catch up. That whatever money they received over the past several years was really amount lower than what they should have received under the foundation aid formula. We've been lucky. We've been getting actually either, you can argue it's the right amount, or actually you can say, depending on who you talk to, that we were getting more than we should have been entitled to. Either way, though, the state has said that they're going to hold districts like us, because we're not alone, harmless, and that they won't take money away from us. But we certainly don't need to play catch up like some of the other districts do. And we'll at least get a 3% increase, which is wonderful for Long Beach. The other number that you'll see, whether it's 1.89 or 1.99% totally, is really then including all these expenditure-based aid, like money we spend on BOCEs, right? Or money we spend for transportation expenses. Aid that's linked to the amount of money that we spend. That's always going to vary, whether it's year to year or state aid run to state aid run, because whatever data that they capture, it's just a snapshot in time, and it doesn't necessarily indicate what the actual total amount we're going to spend. So this number, this 1.3, is just the amount from what was projected this time last year. Again, this number changes every time they do a new state aid run, that number changes. The other thing that's important is that our UPK money is not part of this figure, right? So we're getting more money for universal pre-K. That's not part of this number because this is money for the general fund. And the UPK grant is part of our grant. That's all those transactions are posted in a different fund. So that's something else that explains why a 1.3, why a 3%, why a 1.89, why a 1.99, right? So you really have to be clear about what type of aid categories you're talking about, what point in time you're comparing to, and what type of aid you're looking at. But what I like to look at is the foundation aid, 3%, because that's a real increase in funding that Long Beach is getting from the state. The rest of these numbers are the same as what we presented last time, right? Our pilot number is the same, nothing's changed there. Other revenue, our projections for what we're getting in tuition, which is really the bulk of that money. No change there from last time. We're still keeping our 0% increase, right? You see $0 variance because our tax levy amount that we're proposing for next year, that we're proposing to support next year's spending plan is the same level. We're not asking the community for anything more, okay? And we are not reducing any programs by still keeping our tax levy at a 0 increase. And that's important to know because sometimes people will say, all right, well, you're not increasing the tax levy at the same level. What are you cutting? We're not cutting anything. Our programs are actually being enhanced in certain ways because of some efficiencies that we've talked about already. And with some of the federal grant money that we're receiving, we're able to enhance our programs for the next couple of years while we have those grant funds coming in. So $0 increase in the tax levy, meaning we're not asking the community for anything more than we've asked for in the current year. And just as a reminder, also, we were at a 0 for this current year, so it's really going back 2 years, right? So we've had our tax levy at this level the same it'll be for 3 years in a row, okay? And we're really proud that we're able to pass along some of the revenue that we're getting from the state up here, and some of the grant money that we're getting from the federal government for program enhancements, and some of the additional revenue that we expect to get locally, that we can pass that along to the taxpayers in the form of just keeping things steady, not asking for anything more. Here's that number that we were talking about for capital funds, $4,285,000, $400,000. We've talked about that over the past several meetings, no change there. But what we were able to do, compared to the first draft to the second draft, is reduce this number a little bit, right? So since we were getting the state aid number changed a tad, and I think that was it, right? So we were able to reduce this a little bit because our budget number came down, right? So the fact that our budget number came down a little bit, actually the state aid number came down a little bit from where we were for the first draft, but because we're asking for less than what we had asked for in our first draft, this number is a little bit lower, right? And so we don't need as much for the appropriated fund balance. So if you took a look at what this number was last time, I think it was about 1.1, it's about 100,000 more. So we don't need to appropriate as much for the fund balance in order to make everything meet. And that's the 4.93 that we saw in that first slide about the total draft budget. This I just talked about, and that stays the same. It's a little bit lower than we were in January. I explained that. Again, the tax levy will remain at the same as the current year. And I just explained that, how we reconcile the slightly lower second draft budget with a slightly lower state aid number, but also a little bit lower amount that we need, so the appropriated fund balance is reduced a little bit. It's basically a slide that I just talked about. Some important upcoming dates. This is tonight, right? So again, the board is going to adopt the board's budget. This will be what they'll go forward with. This will be what's on the ballot in May, and the community will vote on that budget. There will be a budget hearing May 10th, which again is not an opportunity to say, I want that number to be different, or I want something else in the budget. It's just a chance for people in the community to come and say whether they support the budget or whether they don't and why. It's a chance for the community to be heard, and that is the week before the budget vote and trustee election, which takes place on May 17th. And that concludes our budget presentation for this evening, and now I'd like to ask the board members if they have any questions or comments. I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
I'll go first if nobody else wants to go. Thank you so much. I was actually sitting up there, nice board. I don't know what kind of board this is, but that was a nice presentation. You can see it. Actually enjoyed listening to you talk about budget. So I don't know what that means. But anyway, you do a great job, and you're very, very, very good at this budgeting gig. So I don't really have any questions about it, except for one, which has two parts. I was reading, right after I had seen the budget presentation, I was reading a forecast about the inflation numbers that were going to come out. I think they might have come out today or something. I haven't seen them, but they're coming out soon, and they're not out already. 8%. So how does regular inflation affect our budget numbers.
So if we know about a particular area that we expect to go up, it's in the budget. For example, we know that for our bus contracts, they're allowed to renew at what's called at CPI, which we're projecting to be about 5% is based on the prior year's price increases. And so numbers include a 5% escalation for CPI for the bus contracts. For some other areas where we know, we may need to increase a little bit more there because of what's happening in the world, we've included that in this budget. What we didn't do is we didn't have like a wholesale, well, we're going to increase everything by 8%. Because if we increase everything by 8%, our budget would be, out of whack, right? And we don't know, right? So it may be one area where prices go up, and it may not be exactly 8%. But what we can do is we can monitor things, right? And we have two options. We can either say, this price is really too high, and we're going to now cut back on what we're asking for. We have a certain amount in the budget, the price is going up, so we'll have to cut back on quantity, so to speak, right? So that we don't spend perhaps at the same level that we thought with much higher prices. We also have two areas in the budget where we know if we spend every dollar in every line item, we should end the year with a surplus. And one is that pre-K, right? Because we know we're getting our pre-K grant. That came forward in the state budget that we're going to get. We're actually getting a little bit more than we have over the past several years. So we have that. So we should at least end up with what we had in the budget for pre-K teacher salaries. Also health insurance. Now we budget for a 10% increase because one year it went up 11%. Another year it went up 10%. It may go up in January. We don't know. We don't know what that health insurance increase is going to be. However, the past several years, it hasn't gone up 10%. One year it actually went down, and that contributed to a large operating surplus we had for that particular year. So if the health insurance does not go up 10%, we know that there in the health insurance code is another resource for us to hedge any price increases that we see where we say we really need something. Okay, and if inflation has caused this price to go up 8%, we can make a decision and say, and the board has an opportunity to weigh in on that because we're going to do a budget transfer, right? So if we have to do a large budget transfer in order to deal with a huge price increase because of inflation, we can make a decision that we want to support that and transfer that money, whether it's from that pre-K line or from our health insurance line. Now, on just a daily basis, when we have little things here and there, that we need to adjust, and the board knows about this, we do a budget transfer, right? Doesn't happen often, but that's how we deal with different changes from what we think is going to happen today to what happens, anytime next year. But in terms of overall, so we have two places to tap into that the board has a chance to weigh in on whether we want to go forward with the purchase. And then we also have a decision not to purchase that same level.
Okay, so my other question is related to that, because, and it really is about how inflation is going to affect our capital projects budget. Because I remember a time not long ago, just a few years ago, where we weren't having inflation and we weren't having supply chain issues. And every single one of our projects, it seemed, came in over budget. Like we had to let go of certain projects because we couldn't, the bids weren't coming in within. So it makes me nervous that whatever it didn't seem to matter. Whatever we budgeted it for, it just came in higher and higher. So I guess my question is, now that we do have supply chain issues and we do have inflation, are we going to be able to do all of the capital projects that we've talked about?
Right, and great question, and it's true. We did have to put off some projects, and one project, as you remember, we didn't do. We decided that it's not worth it for us to go forward with this particular project because the price is just too high. We don't really see the value in going forward with it. We may have a similar situation over the next couple of years if we're dealing with such, skyrocketing inflation and supply chain issues. But when I did speak to our district architect, he felt comfortable with the estimates that he gave us when we talked about capital projects over the past several months. We do have an 18% for soft costs. Included in that is somewhat of a cushion for price escalation, if need, not the full 18%, but because it also includes other fees and things. But he said, listen, we don't know what's gonna happen. And again, to come up with a budget that's something that's 10, 20%, that's too much, and that wouldn't be right either. So we are gonna monitor it. He does feel comfortable with what he had, with what he presented, and we'll have to see. You know, it is a little bit of a, we don't know what's happening next in terms of what's happening out there because of COVID and everything else. But we do our best. We talk to our experts. You know, we have to talk to the district architect who's dealing with bids. He has not seen up to this point a huge increase in bids that we did see a couple of years ago. He hasn't seen that. So.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage our architect because I like him very much and I
Right.
think he does great work, but I believe that the same words came out of his mouth, like as a prelude to a few years ago. So I just, you know, I mean, the board, I recognize as a trustee, and I guess the board recognizes that at that time, we had to make some tough choices and put some projects on hold or let them go completely if we maybe put in that.
And we may have to do that again,
Right.
right? So again, the safeguard for the board is that we go out to bid, we solicit bids, then the board awards, right? If we're not happy with what the board comes in versus the budget, we can forego approving the bid, right? And that's why we have these various steps in our process. We're creating a budget, we're adopting a budget tonight, if goal goes well in May, we go over to state ed, seek approvals for that. We know that can take up to a year. Then we go out to bid. We'll see what the market bears. We'll see what pricing we get in. We'll compare it against our project budget, and then I'll be able to report to the board to say, this is what the project budget was. This is what's coming in for bid, and then we'll be able to decide whether that makes sense or not. And that's really the best we can do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, I'll just jump in. Thank you, Mr. Veto, for the presentation. I don't suspect in a $140 million budget there'll be much trouble finding 7,000 for a CNC router for the robotics team.
Yeah, we will look for something.
Find it, thank you. I'll bother you next fall for that. I just have a major concern concerning the ARP money, the money from the Biden administration to get us through COVID. And I worry about some of that money sort of being hidden in this budget so that when the grant is no longer available in a couple of years, we're going to have some difficulty in terms of paying for some of these programs that now are being covered by grant money. And are those fears real for me in terms of anticipating this? We'll call it anxiety, I guess, because I just don't want to be, 2 years from now saying, well, this was in the grant and we liked it, so we'd like to keep it, but there's no longer grant money, so it's going to come out of district funds, and it's going to come out of Joe Q taxpayer if we're going to keep it. So is that should that be a concern of ours moving forward?
It should. And I'll tell you why, because this is a very lean budget, right? I do not pad codes, and I've been very honest and transparent with the board about that. There were 2 codes that I'm very clear up front about where we should end the year, if every dollar is spent, if everything that's been requested through our budget meetings that happen over the course of a 6-month period with the administrators, when we sit with central administration and we review things, we ask for what is needed based on these meetings. Except for those 2 codes, pre-K teachers, right, that we have in case the grant doesn't come through, and then health insurance. Everything else is budgeted pretty much to the dollar. There's only another code or area that if we don't know about a retirement today, that then later on we find out that somebody retires, then of course there's an unanticipated savings, which is another resource. But besides that, if there's a program, and listen, for ARP money, we're getting several $1 million, right? If there's a program that we want to continue after the ARP funding is over, yeah, it's going to have to be included in the budget, and then there's a decision. Are we going to take something out of the budget, or are we somehow going to say, okay, this is really important to us, and we're going to have to move it to the tax levy? But there is something that I did mention to the board, and the timing for Long Beach is really terrific in terms of that, is that we have debt service expiring in a few years. So if there's a program that we love, 3 years from now that our money expires, we may need to wait 1 year, maybe 2 years to say, we'll bring it back. We'll bring it back because debt service is going to retire, and there's an opportunity to absorb that in our general operating budget. So it may play out that way, where we may say we love it, we're going to hold off. When the debt service expires, we talked about a bond. I don't want to say too much, because I don't want people to think we're going out for a bond now. But in a few years' time, we'll be able to really see what we want to do in terms of all these issues that may play out 5 years from now.
Thank you. And just my last point just concerns student-teacher ratios. We've asked for data throughout this whole budget process. And just looking ahead, some of these teacher-student ratios in different areas of the district are not going to be sustainable going forward. So I would just caution central administration and buildings to be mindful of that going forward in terms of that, because it's a real concern. Sustainability was the operational word 5 or 6 years ago when you were supposed to craft a budget, for 3 years duration. But that didn't last long in terms of a philosophy. But moving ahead, I do think we need to be very, very careful in terms of looking at student-teacher ratios across the various disciplines and across their various levels of school, because some of them presently are just borderline in terms of sustainability that I see. And they give me reason to be anxious moving into the future as well. So thank you not only for this, but for leading us along throughout this process since January. You've been masterful in terms of your command, and you've brought it down to like 15 to 20 minutes. I can remember when it used to be a little bit longer than that, but I'm grateful because it hasn't lost any of the concision or the depth of presentation. So we're grateful for that. So thank you very much. Trustees?
I just have a quick comment. Thank you so much for your presentation. Just when will you be able to present it to more of our community versus the PTAs, maybe our civic associations?
So tomorrow night, I present to, I think it's the high school, PTSN, and that starts our presentations to PTA and the community group, and then I have it over the course of the next several weeks.
Okay. And also, I just want to say, I know it is a lean budget. I just really want to give you my appreciation for always focusing on our students and keeping their programs as intact as possible. I want to thank you all, Central Administration, for doing that. Thank you for putting our children first.
Anybody else? Okay, moving right along.
I do have just one thought. We need to start getting Mrs. Conway just sitting that comment about getting out of civics. We need to start yelling from the rooftops that we have a zero again, because I have not seen anything in the local paper or anywhere locally that we're having a zero for a second year. So start yelling at everybody. It's another zero.
Okay, student organization announcements? None? Questions and comments from the public on tonight's agenda only? Nobody? Okay. Treasurer's report for February 2022. Approval of minutes for executive session March 19, 2022, executive session or regular meeting of March 8, 2022, and executive session of March 31st, 2022. May I have a motion? We have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Conway, second. Any discussion? Ms. Pace?
Yes.
Veto?
Yes.
Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Ms. Conway?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, presentation to the superintendent.
Thank you. Just before we go into the rest of the agenda, there is a challenge basketball student who missed our earlier presentation tonight. So I'd like to present the certificate and congratulate Kevin Leon, who is part of the challenge basketball. Congratulations.
Feel free to come up for a picture. Congratulations, Kevin. Take your picture.
appeal of the superintendent's hearing determination pursuant to education law section 3214 with regard to student aid and authorizes the board president to communicate the determination.
I don't think people can hear that. I don't know whether your microphone's on. You're welcome to use mine or one that's, thank you.
Resolved, the Board of Education hereby denies the appeal of a superintendent's hearing determination pursuant to Education Law Section 3214 with regard to student A and authorizes the board president to communicate the determination as required by law.
Yeah, the motion. Ms. Cronin, may I have a second? Ms. Pace, any discussion? Ms. Pace? Veto?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
And ask the board to consider item number 1, certificate of personnel.
Second, any discussion? Okay, Ms. Pace?
Yes.
Veto?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin?
Yes. Yes.
Conley? And I vote yes.
Item 2, non-certificated personnel.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Pace?
Yes.
Veto?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin?
Yes.
Conley?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
And ask the board to consider items 3 and 4, the adoption of the 22-23 budget and property tax report.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Pace?
Yes.
Ms. Veto?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin?
Yes.
Conley?
Yes.
I vote yes.
And ask the board to consider items 5 through 12.
I'll make a motion. Can I have a second? Okay. Hold a second. Any discussion?
With respect to number 9, the approval of the agreement with the town of Hempstead for the cameras on the bus arms. I'm so happy to see that that's moving forward. We've been waiting for a long time for the county to act. And I'm glad that as soon as we got the authorization that we moved forward with that. My question is, do we as a district pay anything into the installation or maintenance of those cameras?
No cost to the district.
Okay, but we also don't get any of the money. Okay. But we do get Save Kids because we get
That's-
cars and that's
exactly.
clearly, I'm not looking for money here. Okay. Now, we're entering this agreement with the town of Hempstead. Does it apply for when our buses are traveling wherever they're traveling, whether it's within the town of Hempstead, like as they travel through the city of Long Beach or further off, anywhere off of the barrier island?
So my understanding is that if it's an area that's within the town of Hempstead collects that revenue. If it's an area within the city of Long Beach, the city of Long Beach collects that revenue. But I'm not sure at this point whether the city of Long Beach has entered into any kind of an agreement to have this in that jurisdiction. So I don't know where they'll be in September, but the bus arm, the cameras will still be in effect. They just not collect or issue a ticket for that.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, so it really is, it
So
depends on
somebody
the
needs to tell
jurisdiction.
Long Beach that this is like an amazing revenue stream that they could just,
Yeah.
tap into.
Yeah, I know that we're under discussion, I just don't know where they are on this issue at this point.
Okay.
And again, we're scheduling to have it operational for September.
Excellent. Okay, how far ahead did you go? Did you say 11? Well, okay. With respect to 11, I'm happy, those are the deduct change orders. I'm so happy to see we're having all deduct change orders these days. When I first got on board, we used to have so many change orders that cost so much money. So again, Mr. DeVito, great budgeting, great writing specifications, because that's how we avoid all those change orders.
And we do have to give credit to Mr. Grillo on that.
Mr. Grill, okay, well, I love Mr. Grill, okay, great. Now, for both of these projects, are they finished? Is that why we're getting back the reserve money?
That's correct. As we close out a project, if there is any funding against the allowance, which is an unanticipated, unexpected, unforeseen circumstance, then we get that back, and that's how we close it out.
Okay, And are those FEMA projects from Sandy?
No, that's the new boiler that we said we needed.
Okay, excellent. Okay, beautiful, that's all my questions, thank you.
Made a motion, we have a second, we have discussion. Mrs. Pace?
Yes.
Mr. Veto?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Items 13, 14, and 15 are first and second readings of various policies. No action is required on those.
But I have a question, can I just ask one quick question? Are 13 and 14 new policies to our district, or are they revisions of existing policies?
They are actually new policies.
Okay, great, so we need, okay, great, thank you.
And I ask the board to consider items 16 through 19.
We have a motion,
Motion.
we have a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one question. We are, as part of our use of schools approvals, we are granting permissions for the city to use our buildings for summer camp. But under the location in the use of schools, it says PBD. So I don't understand what it is that we're approving. How can we approve a use of schools if we're not saying what school we're approving use of?
So I believe that we are promising the city of Long Beach that we will, and Mr. DeVito, you can correct me, we will allow them to host camp at some site on our school grounds. But because of our various construction projects, we just don't want to specify which school just yet.
Yeah, well, where does it say TBD? No, because that's been clarified. No, that it was,
Oh, my agenda, it had to be, oh, okay, so now it's all been,
it's
so
all
we
been.
know where the construction's gonna be. Oh,
So
excellent.
what happened was is that we were trying to wait for them to figure out whether they wanted to still move forward with doing it at the middle school, knowing that it was going to be very crowded, or if they wanted to move it to East, West, and Wendell, and decided that they wanted, or that they wanted to move it in. We didn't know about that. They needed some time. We found that out yesterday.
Excellent, beautiful, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Ms. Pace? Veto?
Yes.
Ms. Verona? Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Ms. Conway?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, any Board of Ed additional new or old business?
I just have a quick question. And actually, I have a comment as well. First, I want to give a shout out to all of our girls who started on the flag football team and all their parents. It was a really, really exciting game, fun day for the girls. And I really want to thank Ms. Jefferson for bringing that in for us. I think that's great. Kids really had a great time, so I'm really looking forward to a great season. I also want to compliment all the children at the middle school science symposium yesterday. You know, it was supposed to be virtual, so all the children had it on their computers. And what I really enjoyed about it was that the children were able to create these 3D graphs that were amazing. And when we spoke to the kids, that was one of their favorite parts about creating those graphs out of 3D. So a shout out to all the teachers at the middle school for all their hard work. And now I just have really one question, Dr. Gallagher. I know that we've been talking about the social and emotional needs of our students all year long, but how are we continuing to support students with their mental and emotional issues? So as you know, Mrs. Conway, we did actually hire an additional social worker last year. I can tell you that our PPS staff has been in full crisis mode all year, trying to really provide support for our students who are in need, and also accessing the services of our local partners like REACH and Northwell Health. We've also had partnerships with the Long Island Association Against Bullying, and have brought mindfulness programs, and any programs that we could weave into our curriculum, into our schools to really make sure that we're supporting our kids from all different lenses. You can't be academically healthy unless you are in a space to learn. So we've been prioritizing that as we came out of the pandemic. We're doing enough for our kids and for our staff? Or is it ever changing, Dr. Gallagher? So I do feel like we are really doing what we need to do for our students. I sometimes wonder that we're not doing enough for our staff, to be very honest with you. But again, it's difficult to do that because they're working. And, but even that being said, we've looked at, bringing some programs into our schools. I know Dr. O'Malley worked with an organization that trained some teachers to be teacher leaders in this area. And, we've just tried to be very, to use Dr. Ryan's word, mindful about how difficult the last few years has been on our staff and give them the support they need as they work hard to provide for it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, questions and comments from the public? No. Okay, announcements, Palm Beach Classroom Teachers Association.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I just want to do congratulations on adopting your budget this evening. Hope the community comes out and shares your support on May 17th. Look forward to bringing this back to my executive board, supporting it and bringing out the budget to the community and supporting them the way we can. Alina, Mr. Roder, I assume that zero hasn't been shouted because the numbers each year are certainly a moving target as we come up to the adoption of tonight. With that, Mr. Veto, I'd like to thank you for the thorough presentation. So we will pass 3-4 months. I'm not quite sure as many school districts do that as thoroughly as you do here. So appreciate everything that goes into that. That's what we did. Closing, I'd like to thank the Challenger basketball team. I'd like to congratulate the Challenger basketball team over a lot on this success this year.
I just want to ask you, Mr. Hobby, who had the high bowling score the other day?
Who had the high bowling score the other day? It was Tommy O'Brien, custodian Tommy O'Brien.
Very good. Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
we had a very successful fifth annual bowling fundraiser this year. We raised $6,000 last week for St. Jude's pediatric cancer research. So
Just for another point of information, clarification, did Mr. Myers contend at all?
Mr. Myers did not even make the time for it.
Okay, that's not for the public record, Mr. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
We did pull out some regulars. Some of our new and tenured teachers have some pretty strong bowling skills. They wound up on his team this year.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Hobby. Okay, Group B? No, Group C. Thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Epstein. Group C, LBSD? PTA? May I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, may I have a second? All in favor? Good night, everybody. Thank you again.
Good job, sir. What? Good job, sir.